You ready?
Yes, sir.
All right, here we go. Today is July 19th, 2015, also known as the day that my Verizon wireless bandwidth bill resets. Thank the Lord. Of 2015. And this is episode 124 of the Defensive Security Podcast. My name is Jerry Bell, and joining me tonight, as always, is Mr. Andrew Callett.
Good evening, Mr. Bell. So why is it so monumental that your wireless bill resets today?
Because my kids have been traveling, and they both have iPhones, and I think we are 5 times over our limit, so it's going to be like $100 in overages. So
what you're saying is you're really good at controlling your children's behavior.
No, that's not what I'm saying at all.
Wow.
Anyway.
You know, you would think there would be like, as a parent, you could say, okay, for these phones, when they get to X amount of bandwidth, start throttling them as a control on them. I mean, obviously it's not in Verizon's best interest to do that, but you think it'd be a handy control as a parent, controlling your children's cell phone porn usage.
It most certainly would. I should have disabled, LTE on them, and they would have been stuck with 3G, and that probably would have helped. But, live and learn.
I did see a cartoon the other day about, instead of punishing our children by taking away their electronics and phones and such, just take away their chargers and then watch the agony as their batteries slowly die.
That's cruel.
Yes. Well, I'm a bad man. I keep telling you this.
That's true. All right. So just a reminder that the thoughts and opinions we express on this podcast are ours and do not represent those of our employer. Since we don't work at the same place. Anyway.
It's true.
Alrighty, so getting into some stories, we have a kind of a spate of hacking team updates.
It's been a busy week for hacking team analysis.
Yeah. As I said, I suspect people are going to be mining the crap out of their email for probably years to come.
Do you think we've hit all the O days? Do you think we found them all?
I don't think so. Well, we had an Internet Explorer O day this past week from them. So I'll just kind of jump in. The first story we have, I think most of these are from Ars Technica, and this one is hacking team apparently violated EU rules in sale of spyware to Russian agency. So the European Union, in response to Russia's apparent invasion, or I don't know how, if you're in Russia, it's couched, but the EU passed a law forbidding selling of certain kinds of technology to Russia or to the Russian military, and that would have included this hacking team technology. And apparently, the hacking team sold some technology on roughly a month later after that law was passed. So there's quite a bit of back and forth, and it appears that hacking team actually sold it to one Russian company, who in turn sold it to another Russian company, who in turn is an agent of the FSB, but which is still illegal. Of course, the hacking team spokesperson says they've done nothing wrong, and that Russia, they don't have any active customers in Russia, so not really sure exactly what that means. They apparently haven't actually denied selling to Russia. One thing, I'm not an expert in EU law by any stretch of the imagination, but...
Question, are you an expert in anything?
No.
Okay, carry on.
So anyway, it was my understanding, and I'm sure we have some people who will gladly correct me here, but it's my understanding that EU Parliament passes laws that then have to be adopted by their member countries. So, that was my understanding, at least, that I don't know if Italy, for instance, had in turn implemented a law that enacted this EU law. So anyway, it'd be interesting if somebody can help me out there. Is this actually an EU law that they broke, or would it have in turn needed to be an Italian law? But anyway, apparently they did some naughty things. And
how do we blame this on Greece is my first question.
I'm having trouble getting there. I don't know.
We'll work on that.
Yeah. Project
for
next time.
You gotta feel a little sorry for these guys. I mean, right or wrong, whatever your view on it, their entire archive of all business and anything they've ever done is now laid bare for the entire world to nitpick, take out of context, start rumors, write reports on, write articles on. It's gotta suck to be there right now.
Oh, absolutely. In the context, I think, of the Sony breach, I conveyed the story that I used to work for an executive who had a very strong opinion about email retention times, and his perspective was that you really have to have a pretty tight limit on how long you can store email on a server for. And his point was, if somebody were to get a hold of your email, and this was a decade ago, right? His point was, if somebody gets a hold of your email, they can convict you of just about anything by taking your email out of context and picking and choosing things that you've said.
I get it, and I agree with him. My counter would be the vast majority of people in business use email as a filing and archiving system.
But that's all the more problematic.
It is, but let's take this in the context of everything we talk about in security. If you make it too difficult for people, they will go around you and find another way, right? So every other option that we've presented, whether it be for productivity, whether it be for security, people love to use email as a storage medium.
I don't disagree. I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just...
So I guess what... I don't mean to cut you off. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I guess what I'm saying is that at some point I think we've failed to convince the users of the world to not use email as long-term storage and archiving. So then it comes down to, how do we secure it better?
Yeah.
For a long time, we didn't have enough bandwidth to really worry about this problem from an outsider.
True.
Right? I mean, I'm not going to pull 400 gig over a T1 without that getting noticed. Hopefully.
Yeah, true.
Knock on wood.
Yeah.
So in part, the rise of bandwidth has made these remote data exfiltration issues so much more prevalent. And I think we don't look at emails all that sensitive.
No, it's in probably any given email is not all that sensitive. But it kind of points to back to the fact that if you have sensitive emails, you probably ought to be encrypting it, right? Like at the message level, which would have helped mitigate this.
Maybe it depends on what rights they had.
No, I'm talking about PGP encryption of the individual. Yeah, between the sender and
users. Yeah,
right.
Okay, how does that work in a reply to all scenario? That is
I'm not saying that I have a good idea. It's just an idea.
I get it. I guess I just go back to, yes, we can come up with mitigating controls, and I agree with that. But what I'm struggling with, and the only reason why I'm sort of challenging on this is, you and I can do that. The vast majority of employees can't or won't.
Yeah, that's fair.
So then, if we're going to look at it from a practical standpoint, then what?
And especially, it sounds like a lot of the most damning, for lack of a better term, email that are being pulled out are emails that are being exchanged with outside entities, and so it's probably within the realm of reasonability to encrypt internal email like that, it's probably not reasonable to expect that you could do that with outside partners because there's no standard.
And if I'm the company's lawyer, I'll say, save that for at least 10 years.
Yeah, true.
So you've got competing goals here. So I think, in my mind, the takeaway is don't think of email as this innocuous, not important source of data.
Yeah.
I'm not that this is in any way the gold standard, but it just shows you the immaturity of the thinking. Show me any of the compliance standards that mention hardening email security for exfiltration and attack. I don't know of any.
Nothing in particular. I mean, I think the expectation is that you're applying those standards consistently. But I mean, there's nothing akin to PCI for email. There's no, like cardholder data environment for email.
It's true.
So moving on to the next Hacking Team lovely story is Hacking Team's evil Android app had code to bypass Google Play screening, and there's actually also a similar story relative to iOS. This one comes from SC Magazine, and in the case of the Android Play Store, what apparently they did was, or the Google Play Store, apparently what they did was they had a news app called B News that requested some innocuous permissions, but it had included in it a privilege escalation exploit. And this particular app apparently had only been downloaded 50 times, but the author's belief is, or I guess this is Trend Micro, their belief is that potentially there's, that was actually just a proof of concept, and it was
to see if they could buy the security controls of Google Play.
Right.
Yeah.
It was kind of weaponized on a case-by-case basis for specific customers. So a particular customer will come to them and say, "Hey, I want an app that does X, Y, and Z," and they would kind of wrap in this lovely bit of technology, and then off they go. And then in the case of iOS, there's been a lot of discussion about, well, as long as you don't you have a jailbroken iOS device, you're good to go. This news story, this new revelation shows that, well, that's not entirely true. Mm-hmm. Because apparently Hacking Team had an Apple developer certificate, which effectively allows them to, sideload without a lot of bells and whistles going off, custom applications that they wrote even on non-jailbroken devices. So clever bastards. I guess clever bastards will be clever bastards, won't they?
Well, that is somewhat self-evident, yes. But it's funny because we're seeing in one tight little bundle all of the FUD and sort of some of the worst case scenario stuff that we've thrown around for a while now.
Yeah.
And these guys had it all assembled. So it tells me other people have it all assembled.
Yeah, I can't just given the totality of what we've seen, I don't think they're necessarily all that unique in what they had.
But they had a heck of a toolkit.
Yeah, and I don't have a link for it right now, but there was also a story about they have a BIOS rootkit, so a UEFI rootkit that infects your BIOS and survives, even hard drive.
Wait, I think I've heard this story before.
I know. And when that one broke, I tweeted out that it kind of sounds like bad BIOS is turning out. The entire bad BIOS ecosystem is turning out to be something, a product of Hacking Team.
You're just a bad BIOS truther.
It could be. And then the next.
Well, can I stop for a second though?
Yeah, go ahead.
Right. So we talk about all this stuff, and over the past couple of years, we've had this concept that advanced attacks can only come from state sponsors. Now, show me with this toolkit that has just been laid bare from Hacking Team, any of the major attacks that had to have been state sponsored could have been done, in my opinion. without really diving into every single one.
Yeah.
Let's go back to Sony. It had to be North Korea or, whatever. It had to be China because they're the only ones who could afford this and could do this. But look, this is something you can buy on the black market or buy from, gray market or perhaps even the private sale industry from. I'm trying to figure out legitimate business. I don't know if you want to call Hacking Team legitimate or not. This is possible. So to go to the only answer being state sponsored, I think is again a mistake, and I still question what the motivation is to keep going back to that as the only answer.
In an Inception-like turn of events, apparently the Hacking Team breach is being, of course, blamed on a nation state. And I think it is it's purely coincidental that the incident response firm is apparently Mandiant. So
that right, complete.
It's
just another isolated incident.
Yeah, absolutely. But
we need a soundbite for that. We need like a little music
yes.
Every time it's another isolated incident.
Completely coincidental. You're on a good point, and I would think that given the breach and the fact that all this source code has been, I think, multiple times been uploaded to Pastebin, now it's even worse because now all these techniques, the code, the tactics, everything is out there for all to copy and mimic. And I would expect that attribution was hard before and is going to be even harder now because, these state-sponsored tactics that apparently this company had been selling is now in the open. It's in the public domain.
I wonder how many IOC type feeds got updated with Hacking Team stuff over the last couple of weeks. Probably all of them.
Good question. I don't know.
And I wonder how many got hits.
That's one thing I wonder about a lot is, retrospectively looking back at the 0 days that were found and, the tactics that have been released, how many times have these been seen? I think there was a story about one of the Adobe 0 days had been seen previously a couple of times. But that was just a little minor story, though.
However, we have seen cases where the same 0 day has been independently found by different organizations.
True.
So, you'd always have to get to, same code level or something. I don't know. Just at a general level, though, it doesn't necessarily prove it. But it is interesting. I wonder net if this is helping us by all these things being leaked. Look at all the patches that got 0 days taken off the market, patches that got released. Flash finally actually from the Google 0 day initiative built in some more robust overall architecture to Flash that would help with 0 days like this in the future. I don't know. It's good and bad, but I gotta think taking 0 days as a defender, taking 0 days out of circulation is a positive, assuming people patch. Now, the question is, in the meantime, how much damage is being done as this gets blown all over the place while we are trying to patch?
The net benefit that I see coming out of this, or one of the net benefits, other than 0 days being taken off the street, is the general awareness about that these things are real. They're not magic. It isn't exclusively in the domain of advanced nation states, and this stuff it's complicated. It's detail oriented, and we're as defenders we have our work cut out for us, and we're going to have to, in my view, kind of dramatically change. If we want to stay ahead, we're going to have to change our game. So that's my takeaway.
Yeah, and it argues yet again that prevention is failing. We have to invest more in detection.
Yeah. Or or fundamentally change the way defense is done. Which I'm not even sure how that would go, and I'm sure there's plenty of vendors out there who would stand up and tell me how that would work. But I agree fundamentally with your point. The next story we have hacking team related is from Brian Krebs, and the title is "Hacking Team Used Spammer Tricks to Resurrect Spy Network."
Shocking.
Yeah. So when this came out, it was a bunch of hoopla, and the story here is that the Italian National Military Police had a botnet running, which they used for intelligence gathering on some unknown targets, and they had been running their infrastructure at a hosting company on I guess it was on a reseller. As far as I can tell, it was on a reseller's server. Don't have a ton of detail on that, but at some point, for whatever reason, the IP address space that the server was hosted on just went away. They stopped. The provider stopped announcing it. So I don't know if they closed up shop, or that's not very clear to me. However, the effect on the Italian National Military Police was they lost their connections to their bots, and so they worked with Hacking Team and another ISP to announce that address space out, through this other ISP's. Basically associated with their AS number, and then did a BGP announcement, set up a server, set up a Hacking Team command and control server, regained access to these bots, pointed them to another command and control server, and off they were going. And apparently this is some super complicated attack that got people really up in arms. This is like basic stuff. I mean, it's not hard to announce a net block. If you have an AS and you're an ISP whose upstream accepts routes from you, this is not hard. This is not complicated stuff. And in fact, we see shenanigans happening all the time with different ISPs in different parts of the world announcing major big net blocks, and having
half the time they're just fat fingers and misconfigurations.
Oh yeah, sure, but it happens. This isn't like advanced attacking techniques here.
And if you want to know more about BGP, which I really suggest you do, OpenDNS, who bought BGP Mon back in March, by the way, and is launching a BGP hijacking monitoring service or something. Anyway, their blog, they had a 2-part blog on BGP and how it runs the internet, and it's actually a good primer. Go read that on OpenDNS.com's blog. But, there really shouldn't be a problem, because ISPs should know what ranges should be coming from their customers, and they should be filtering for that.
Yep.
And this is where they fall down. It's really the ISPs filtering the inbound announcements.
Yeah, as you get closer and closer to the to the internet core, it becomes harder and harder to do that filtering.
It's true. And as we all know, the internet core is actually in Fargo, North Dakota.
True.
And it's running off of an old SunSpark. It's true. It's true. Uptime is like, what is it? I think they're up to 18 years now.
You so funny.
Carry on.
All right. So that's the Hacking Team fun for the week.
So what is your overall take on Hacking Team as an entity? Good guys, bad guys, somewhere in between?
They were people who were filling a market.
That was a very evasive answer. But yes.
No, I mean
So is my crack dealer down the street, buddy.
Well, okay, fair enough. Look, I think the reality is that if it wasn't them, it would be someone else. I personally find the whole industry that they're playing in a little reprehensible, but just at a personal level. But I kind of understand.
Well, do you find weapons manufacturing, kinetic weapons, reprehensible?
No. Well, I mean, not particularly. I think I find this reprehensible because it is it's intended. I mean, it's a different purpose, right? It is not. It is used far beyond what what kinetic weapons are used for.
But I guess it's in the hands of the user that make these good or bad, right?
Well, and that's what it comes down to. Exactly right. So, I guess my point is that if Hacking Team weren't there, and if no other commercial company were there, governments are going to still come up with this stuff on their own.
Well, that's a stretch. They can barely come up with.
Well, it depends. I mean, it depends, right? Depends on which government you're talking about.
Right. And, maybe very small governments, and it would take them 18 years, and it would only be valid for Windows 3.1.
There was an interesting going back to the story about Russia. Russia allegedly buying some of the Hacking Team software. There was an interesting assertion by, I think it was the Second Layer Deep organization, that the reason they bought it was not for offensive use, but actually to analyze it and be able to defend against it.
Well, it's possible. It's plausible.
Yeah.
I also think it's interesting, right, that if I've got a 0-day that I'm selling, I have to find this careful balance. If it's overused, the value is diminished. Especially if the manufacturer finds out about it and patches it. Now, not everybody patches, but it's probably an interesting, intricate dance they have to go through to figure out the right amount of use of their effective 0 days.
Yeah, I think one thing that I would like to impart upon people is that I don't think that the 0 days are the major story here, at least from an attack perspective, in a broader systematic risk perspective, because we know, for instance, that the Adobe Flash 0 days were weaponized really fast. I mean, we know that happened, and they got pushed out, and that's a flash in the pan. Where I think the major long-term ramifications are going to be is what people have learned in terms of, so you can, 0 days are going to come and go, right? But these tactics on how to integrate those into an ecosystem of an attack platform, that's where I think the larger systemic risk is going to lie. And I think we're going to be wrestling with criminal organizations and probably even some governments using what they've learned from this disclosure for some time.
Well, on the defender side, this is something we've got to think about too, is how do we defend against 0 days?
Yeah.
Patching is not if patching is our only response, we have no adequate controls to fight 0 days.
True.
And then that opens up a whole big conversation about how do you get intelligence that 0 days are floating around? How do you boil that into your vulnerability management program? How do you mitigate those 0 days? It's a complicated topic.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Anywho.
All right. So, if it were an easy answer, I'd be off making billions of dollars instead of sitting here talking to everyone.
Making $1.
Making $1.
Well,
so
we do have Patreon donors.
I know.
And we love our Patreon donors.
I kid. Yes, we love our Patreon donors, and we are in the process of sending out some love.
We've got some special top secret swag that's going out to the Patreon donors first.
That's right. All right, so moving on to our next story, which is not Hacking Team related, and this one comes...
Well, the hell with it then. I don't want to talk about it.
This one comes from SC Magazine. And the title is Avoid Hiring a Cybercriminal, Understand Motivations, and Thoroughly Vet Employees. So the impetus for this story was a large multinational crackdown on the Dark Ode online criminal forum that apparently spanned 20 different countries and netted 70 arrests, including a person named Morgan Culbertson, who happened to be an intern at none other than FireEye. And apparently Mr. Culbertson had actually been the creator and distributor of the Dendroid Android malware, which is relatively pervasive, and he sold it for the low price of $300, and you could buy the source code, the whole package, for $65,000.
I cannot abide these illegal hacking aliens coming in and undercut the valid market for pricing for exploit code like this. Undercutting the market.
Completely. I mean, how do you think? How does somebody like Hacking Team compete when you got this kind of crap going on?
It's not fair.
It's not fair.
There should be a law.
In fact, there is. So anyway, and by the way, that will be interesting to see if this were to have happened maybe a year in the future, and that all that Wassenaar stuff goes through. I bet you he would be charged on yet another. For yet another crime, because this, I believe, would fall into that
could be
bucket. So
is the allegation that he grabbed intel out of FireEye for some of his shadier activities?
No, and that's kind of the maddening thing about this is, it's there's all this hoopla about, well, you should not hire cyber criminals. And, this person had all kinds of access to, he worked for FireEye, and therefore he would be able to evade technology. And so, number one, I'm not sure FireEye does a whole lot in the terms of Android, which apparently is his forte. And, the other thing is apparently FireEye does do background checks. And, this person's all of 20 years old, so he probably he's not a hardened criminal, I'm guessing. And so, the whole point about this is smacks of the debate that flares up every couple years about, we should not be hiring, hackers because they're terrible people. And, I guess that becomes a philosophical
hacker's
debate.
a bad term, right? Hacker's probably...
Well, I agree. But
we should qualify that in some way.
But this, I don't understand how is that discussion coming up in the context of this story? Because this person was not like some convicted hacker, convicted... whatever.
I'm gonna share something with you that most people don't know.
All right.
Journalists have an agenda.
Really?
And they have a story they want to tell.
Oh, fine.
I agree with you. It is, from what we know now, I don't even think the article talks about what he did for FireEye.
He worked on some intern focused program. And to FireEye's credit, when they've learned of the arrest, they terminated all of his access. But I don't think he was working on their core. Well, I mean, I guess it doesn't really say what the heck he was working on. But
I have friends at FireEye. I could probably sniff around, but probably isn't something I could share on the show. But let's assume, just for the sake of conversation, that he was in their malware research department. Straight up malware research, just sake of conversation. Yeah, I don't know that FireEye is encountering a ton of Android stuff, but then again, we also don't know if they're working on products for Android.
Well, that's fair.
We don't know what techniques they're researching.
There's just this undercurrent of assertion that that this person was leveraging his position, on both sides, to
right.
Anyway, I just find the whole thing a little off-putting.
I hear you. I don't think it's the case in this scenario, but I do think about this. Makes me think about, and this is exactly what's frustrating you is this point that this is not related, but we have a huge shortage of talent. I wonder if that makes certain companies a little looser in their hiring standards to get good InfoSec people on board.
I mean, it could be, but this is not an epidemic problem, right? I mean, we're not hearing story after story, or even any stories at all about, convicted criminals in the IT department of a company.
Do you have no compassion for these authors and these journalists who need to drive clicks?
Obviously, I don't.
Do you not care about their needs?
No, I guess I don't.
A unique headline drives velocity.
Boy.
So insensitive.
All right. I'm sorry.
Do you even culture, bro?
I'm sorry. So let's move on to our last story. This one comes from ERP Scan, and it's a report they published based on the attack on USIS last year.
It's a PDF, just so you know.
It is a PDF. It's a PDF warning.
Opening it may kill your grandparents. I don't know.
Trigger warning.
Yeah, it could assassinate your teachers. I have no idea, but just so you know.
So this really points out a couple of things. It's a 15-page long PDF. USIS was a background investigation company who had, I think, 23,000 records stolen at the time, and were subsequently lost all of their government contracts, and which totaled to $2.3 billion, if memory serves. And I did the math. Something didn't seem right to me, so I don't know if there's something else, but they lost 23,000 records, right? 25,000 records, and they had contracts worth $2.8 billion. I did the math. That's over $100,000 per background check, apparently. That's that. So there must be more.
That cannot be right.
There must be more. Must be more to the story.
I would expect a background check to go for a couple hundred.
Yeah, well, maybe they have other lines of business that make up the difference, but
or they did.
Well, they did because they filed for bankruptcy, so they apparently don't anymore.
So a direct breach disclosure led to the business going away.
Yes, and it's a little more involved than that, because apparently the breach resulted from a USIS vendor. Does this sound familiar to you? Being breached, and that vendor's system had access to this SAP application, right? So SAP, this application apparently was not publicly accessible, but it was accessible to USIS, some USIS vendors, including this other one who I don't think they named, was compromised and used as a launching point to get into this SAP application. And a lot of the reports actually this ERP Scan company trying to divine, based on the time frame, which specific vulnerabilities were exploited. And so they go through a list of, which likely things were used, and their most likely candidate, by the way, was a default administrative password, which was released. A patch was released in 2002 so 11 years later, this happened. So
why do you have such unrealistic patching expectations, Jerry?
It
takes time.
And that is the point that I wanted to drive home, which is that these really big applications are extraordinarily hard to patch. And I think on the one side, they're very hard to patch, and on the other side, people get this sense of comfort because, well, it's only accessible internally. It's not on the internet, and therefore we should worry less about not having patched it. And I think that as time goes on, we're seeing more and more of these applications, whether it was Home Depot or Target or OPM or USIS, targeting these line of business applications. It's becoming common knowledge how to exploit some of these things, and most attackers that encounter them probably know that they've not been patched, and they're gonna poke at them. So
yeah, 100% agree.
Here's a good opportunity. Again, from a monitoring perspective, you might, if you can't patch it. And by the way, I understand having worn the IT hat, I understand the problem, right? Because you invest, sometimes tens or hundreds of millions of dollars in this application long time ago, and you really can't upgrade it. There isn't an upgrade path, or at least one that is cost effective. And so what are you going to do instead?
Well, it goes back to what we talk about a lot, which is proper risk profiling.
Right.
Understand the threat model, and then understand ways you can mitigate against it.
Right.
And in this case, it might be monitoring. It might be, anomaly detection on users. It might be, all sorts of stuff.
Right. Yeah. Something. I mean, I hopefully the message is starting to get out that these things are, they're being targeted. They're vulnerable, and in my experience, I don't know if it's your experience too, but a lot of times these applications, you're not allowed to scan them.
Yeah, which I have zero sympathy over. Zero. I really don't. I if scanning it's going to knock the application over, what do you think a bad guy's going to do?
I hear you. I'm with you.
Mind you, that's not a popular opinion, but I would challenge it anytime it came up, and I would challenge it regularly. In other words, if I had control over that scenario, and as the guy running the scanner, and somebody said to me, "You can't scan that application," I would demand to know why. I would give them a deadline of, I don't know, a year, and say, "What are you going to do to remediate it? I'm going to be scanning that application in a year."
And I would also say, if someone tells you that you can't scan something, that should set the hair on the back of your neck.
Absolutely. There's nothing off limits to the bad guys. Why should it be off limits to the good guys?
Yeah. Well, and I would also say that there's probably a correlation between things that people don't want you to scan and things that are going to be a real problem,
right,
for you.
And a good scanner can also be tuned tremendously, very low and slow, very aggressive. You can do a lot. So for somebody to say it's fragile, don't scan it. There's a lot more nuanced answer to that in terms of, well, what's the problem? What are you concerned about?
Right.
Right.
Absolutely.
So I don't know. I just think that is, once again, that's somebody accepting a risk they don't understand they're accepting by saying it's too risky for you to scan this box, so you don't scan it. They're mitigating one risk, which is uptime, or downtime in this case, but in turn accepting a completely different risk that may be larger long term. And
right.
Do they have the knowledge and the authority to truly accept that risk?
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. So yeah.
I had one other quick item.
Go ahead.
Windows 2003 went end of life this last week.
So long we hardly knew ye.
I wonder, much like XP, how much of Windows 2003 is still rolling around in the environment.
I bet there's quite a lot.
So what this means is no new security patches.
Unless you pay.
Right, paying lots.
Yeah.
So come next month's Patch Tuesday, when all sorts of issues roll out, people are going to start quickly figuring out, are these also appropriate to Windows 2003?
And new hacking team vulnerabilities.
And bad things will occur. It will be ugly.
Probably so.
So, might be worth thinking about some mitigation techniques. I don't know. Application whitelisting, EMET, something.
Absolutely. Anyway, and it is frustrating to see how many companies I think are getting caught flat-footed on that. Microsoft has not kept that a secret.
No.
Um,
I've got a buddy at another company who was telling me that they've got a couple hundred still in the environment, and they're going to the folks who use those machines for whatever application. And I don't know all the details, but they basically were saying, no, we can't move off our application. It's not compatible with anything else. So let me get this straight. You have an application you're running that's only capable of running on a Windows 2003 server. So this tells me likely that this application has now been orphaned. So it probably can't be patched itself. So that application is probably also end of life.
Yep.
That is an interesting problem.
Well, it's not unlike the thing we just talked about. You get these old legacy applications, and it becomes difficult or impossible to upgrade them. And one thing that I think would do us well, and I think we're kind of moving away from this with the whole agile and DevOps movement, is that we really, when we go into a big development, you're going to deploy Oracle Financials or SAP or something like that, or even something smaller, something lesser. You really have to think through the life cycle plan. Because at some point, when you go into those things, it's all about, how are we going to modify our business processes to suit this stupid thing, and and all of the hoopla that goes along with that. And do we have the right number of servers and right database server licenses and all kinds of things like that? But we often don't think about what's going to happen. It's kind of like when you buy a car, at some point you're going to have to get rid of the car, but you're not thinking about that when you go buy the car. You're just enamored with this new piece of technology, and I think this is in some respects how we get here, and so we don't develop the solution in a way that's maintainable.
But we've been doing this long enough now. This is a known problem.
It is, but I see everybody doing it.
I agree. We should be doing better.
And so, I wonder, and this is crazy off the hip shooting here, but I wonder if the whole movement towards, cloud hosted or SaaS style applications will ultimately help that.
Sure. You would think. It'll be interesting when important SaaS applications get orphaned, if that's possible, if that will happen. But
right,
yeah. Along these kind of same lines, Windows 10 coming out, the Home Edition, not Professional, not Corporate Editions, Home Edition will have automatic patching turned on and will be mandatory.
Yeah.
For the OS and Microsoft apps.
Right. And there's some interesting debates about the sanity behind that, but
I see pros and cons.
Yeah.
Right? But I think overall, it'll result in a better environment for Microsoft and their users, but they're giving up control.
Right.
Whether they like it or not. But I think the average American sitting at home with their Windows box is probably better off having it this way.
I don't disagree with that. I think the problem we're going to see is going to materialize in some of their problematic patches. And there are some people who have asserted that actually this might be why Microsoft has adopted this position, is that they will soak it out in the commercial market for a little bit before they push it out to commercial customers. I don't know. I don't really have enough visibility into what their big patching strategy is to know if that's a real thing.
The enterprise revs of Win 10, in from what I'm understanding, will be similar today. You can put it at an SMS server. You can control when and how patches get pushed out, all that jazz.
Right.
But,
yep. So it'll be interesting. I do think it'll be probably a net benefit for people's computers to be, patched, especially since we know that most exploitation is, at least at this point, using things that are pretty old. So that's that's not going to be a bad thing, I don't think. So anyhow, I think that is the show for this week. I appreciate everyone's time. Again, thank you for our Patreon donors. Thank you very, very much. Certainly appreciate that. Hopefully you enjoy the treat we are about to send to you. If you like the show, you can follow us on Twitter at DefensiveSec. You can give us some 5-star love on our iTunes page. You can find the show in show notes with links to the stories that we've talked about on this show and past episodes on our website, www.defensivesecurity.org. You can follow Mr. Callett on Twitter at Lurg, me on Twitter at Maliciously. And by the way, just a reminder that the High-Tech Crime Investigation Association conference is coming up August 30th through September 2nd in Orlando, Florida, htciaconference.org. I booked my rooms and got my ticket today, so I hope to see you there. I know not you, but
sadly, yes. No, I will
you
not.
as in listeners.
Yes.
So,
and I expect live daily updates.
Wow.
As to how the show's going.
That's a high bar there, mister.
Well, I demand perfection.
All right. Well, thank you very much, everyone, and we'll talk again next week.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great week.
Bye. I've got a herd of animals down here with me, so dog just doesn't like me out of her sight right now. I don't know why. She apparently she was throwing up last night. Is that oh, nice.
Was that a 4-legged critter?
Yeah, puking.
Oh. Well, apparently somebody's a critic.
Hang on one second.
Not a fan of our show. Well, everyone's a critic. You hate me. It's fine. No, carry on. It's all right. I know you hate me.
That's fine. I do.
Yeah.
I do.
Yeah. I know you do. I'm aware.
Good. Glad we're on the same page.
That's because you're an insensitive bastard. That's why you forgot.
Well, that's true.
I mean, I don't want to point it out so obvious, but...
I mean, I hope that you're not just now figuring that out. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.
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 Bye-bye.